what's some common traps that you can tell investors out there to avoid? I saw you on a webinar. And you went through this contract with a fine tooth comb. It was really cool. So, but what are some of the common traps that you see novice investors in commercial property make?
Buying the wrong yield, buying the wrong returns, looking at it as a transaction rather than building a portfolio. Here at Unicorn, we build portfolios. We don't just help people buy properties. The thing is, I had this thing illustrates. I'll show you a story. I had someone who called me and wanted a strategy session. So I booked in a strategy session off our webinar, and it was a gentleman from that lives in Campbelltown in Sydney, and he had a friend in ACT, and they said, we've been to a few of your webinars, and now we're going to buy a commercial property. All right. When someone says, I've been to a few of your webinars and now I know all the knowledge that I know to buy a commercial property, that's already a red flag. So I said, that's great. What are you going to buy? We just want your opinion on this. Okay. Don't want to engage us as a buyer's agent. We just want your opinion on this. That's fine. What are you going to buy? There is a NAB and Bendigo Bank in Mount Gambier that we want to buy for $2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So I say to them, no, not Mount Gambier. Mount Barker, in South Australia and in Adelaide that we want to buy. And I said, firstly, have you been to Mount Barker? No, haven't been to Mount Barker. Do you know where it is? Yes, it's about 30, 40 k's out of Adelaide. So, okay. So what's the yield on this? It's 7.5%, and that's what I'm going to buy. How long's the lease? It expires next year. So I'm like, how do you know the tenant is going to renew? Oh, well, the agent thinks it's most likely going to renew. Right. Okay, great. So you are a novice commercial property investor. You've been to a few webinars and you're going to sink $2.5 million into a place you've never been to, don't know, just looked on Google Maps, just because it has a tenant that's a bank tenant and that the agent said is most likely going to renew. Mm-hmm. That's got red flags so into everything, right? So I said to him, okay, let me break this down to you. You think Mount Barker is like a Camden in Sydney, right? Just out of Sydney. He's like, yes. I said, no, Mount Barker is not like a Camden. It's like a regional town driving between Sydney to Canberra, where your friend is at the moment. And he's like, oh, okay. Then number one. Number two, never negotiated with a bank. Do you know that banks at the moment are actually pulling out and signing shorter and shorter leases? No. You know that just for 7.5% yield, that when they vacate, being a regional area, the supply of tenants is about 10% of what a metro city would be. So to get another tenant to replace the same rent as the bank will probably be highly unlikely, considering they've been there for so long. Don't know that, right? Now, I said to him, the true way of really doing that is not a 7.5%. If you were my client, I would never put you into a property like that, especially your first time and you want to spend $2.5 million. Right? I would be looking at buying that property at a 9% yield because it's regional and it's got a bank tenant. There's a risk that they won't renew, and plus the other rents might come in low. I would be buying that at 9%. Working through and negotiating by giving them incentives and extras, which could take 6 months with a bank. We've negotiated with a NAB. We know how long it's taken to get a new lease, and then selling that back into the market for a 7% yield when I have a new 3 or 5 year lease. I said, that's the game, not the game of buying that as a 7.5%, because what you're going to find is the bank will play hardball and you're the little person, they're the big person. They'll play hardball, you'll cave in, your rents will drop, and it ends up in a 6% yielding property in Mount Barker, and you've just lost $500,000 on the value of that property.
Also, a lot of those regional banks are purpose-built. They're pretty unique buildings that kind of are made for banks, right? And then you also got the safes involved as well that have got to be removed, et cetera, right? Yeah, no, we've done a bit of work on that.
Yeah, so that's the pitfall. Like people who been to a few webinars think, okay, great, I can now go and buy. What does someone say to me? You pay for it either way, just whether you pay for it in real education, paying a professional, or you're paying for it in education by fucking it up.
Yeah. I was worried, like when you see a deal, say it's on a 5+5 lease and it's coming to, you're in the 4th year of the first term of that lease, right? Why would anyone buy that? To me, it's like, well, the reason that the guy's selling is he knows the tenant's going to leave, right? That is my number one red flag with commercial. Is that right?
always. I think the thing is this is another thing that comes down to it is a lot of people who are commercial property investors want to sell and they go, I'm going to sell. That's it. Put it on the market. That's it. Right. They never spent time tidying up that property. If they had spent 3 months tidying, like going back to the tenant to renegotiate the rent or the lease, giving them some incentive to get them on a longer lease, looking at all their pest and building issues and tidy all of them up, they can get a property, their pricing could go up by 20%. But they don't actually do that. It becomes a trigger happy scenario. Like I spoke to a client who wants to sell her property because she goes, oh, I think it's a dud. And I'm like, how do you know? Have you tried leasing it out? Have you tried selling it? Have you tried tidying up that property so that you can give it the best option to sell? And she's like, no. I said, but you're telling me you want to do residential flips. Why don't you first start out with doing your commercial? Like you've got a property here, tidy up the lease, go and get a new tenant, and then sell it. Right. So I think what happens in those stages is that when you're talking about, people are on that expiring lease term and everything else, is that it was a trigger happy decision to sell rather than a conscious decision to sell. And if you're a savvy investor, you could actually be picking up a really great deal because knowing that most people will walk away from that deal.